la 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 lam, la la li la la, ya da da da, ya da di da da, ya da 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 da, ya da di da da. Ya da di da da da, ay 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 na ya da di da da, ay da di da da. Ay ay da 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 da, ay da di da da, ay da di da 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 da. Ay narayanam, ya da da di da da, ya narayanam, ya da da di da, ah da da ya da da dam, ya da di da dam, ya da da dam, ya da di da dam. Ya da di da, a da di da, a da di da, di da di da, a da di da. Oi, I da 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 di dam, I da dam, I da. Ahoy, I da di di dim, I dam, I dam, I da, ya dam, ya di dam. Ya da dam, ya di dam, ya di dam, ya di dam, ya di da, I di dam, I di dam. It's so important not to rush. When I was singing this Niggun, I had for a moment a temptation. Sing it faster, you should get to the end. And it hit me what a stupid thing this was, because it was so good in the middle of the Niggun. Why should I rush? And when I start thinking about the compulsion that we have when it comes to Davvenen, rush, 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 so that it goes by the quantity of words that have been recited rather than the attention given to that moment when you were right there. So why rush through it? And that's a very important thing to remember. Where you are is good. Reb Zusha had such a way of doing it. For months he was on one page of the Talmud, and his friends asked him, "No, when are you going to go to the next page?" He says, "Why should I go to the next page? As da is mir gut. I feel good right here. Why should I go to the next one?" And I think in the issue of spiritual, any level of work, it's important not to rush, to be right then and there, right in that place. I think that's another meaning of kavanah. I have a lot of things that I want to bring up today, and we'll see how far we get. One of them is, there is a fallacy that comes from us taking the attitude from the book of Deuteronomy, the 5th book of Moses, so seriously that we don't do it right, that we fall into an error. The error is that once you are on a certain level in your spiritual life, you always will be there. That sense that, I've achieved this level, I'll always be there. And if anything is happening in the spiritual life, it puts this to a lie. How could I say that I'll always be there? I don't know where I'm going to be. I'm just trying to straighten this up a bit. And so what happens is that the moment when I'm in this moment to taste it and to enjoy it, look at the calendar. There's Pesach and there's Tisha B'Av. There's Yom Kippur and there's Purim. And if you were to say that every day we have to be in the same place, say the same prayers, do the same thing, that would make an impossible demand on human beings. So the rabbis and the Hasidic rabbis make a point to say that an angel is called a stander. You put him in this place, he stands in this place, he does what this place demands. Omed. As it says, Seraphim Omdimim. The seraphim, they're standing close to the throne of God. But about people it is said, V'natati lecha mehalchim bein ha'omdim ha'ele. I'll make you someone who walks. And when I walk on one leg and the other leg is like chesed, gvura, yes and no, and up and down. And I live in all these walking is also bobbing up and down. I'm not in the same place. So, Rabbi Zalman in the Tanya, in the second book of the Tanya, does a preface in which he deals with this issue that a human being is called one who walks. And he says, Sheva yipol tzaddik vikam. 7 times will a tzaddik fall and yet rise. So to expect that there won't be a roller coaster in spirit, forget it. It's not going to go that way. So first of all, I want us to take a look at a kind of progression that seems to be the progression of spirit. I heard this from a remarkable person, Dr. Carl Stern, who explained it to me, going to the issue of the psychosexual development that Freud describes. When a baby is a baby, it's all in the mouth. It's in the oral stage, and it wants to absorb. And what does the baby want? Mother's milk. What's the best description that the Torah has of mother's milk? I'll put you into a land of milk and honey. If you ever had to prepare formula for a baby, you know what I'm talking about. It's milk and honey in a way. And it is so wonderful when a person first gets touched by spirit. I'm not talking about people necessarily born in families where they have it from the mother's milk on, But when somebody becomes a Baal Tshuva, wants to get into it, it feels so good. Now I finally found my place. It nurtures my soul. I know exactly what I get. Oh, it is so good. I'm so turned on. If you go back to the late 60s, early 70s, there used to be some people who would say, I'm into this now. Out of sight, far out, where am I? This is great. This is the greatest spirituality that can ever be. But if you were to meet him a half a year later, you'd say, what are you into now? I found a guru with better Shaktipat than the one that I had before. And so what happens is that there are some folks who will continue to go and look for the holy chocolate. And if they find it in Judaism, they'll stay for a while. And they won't stay on when the next phase comes. Then they'll go to someone else who'll give them the same kind of a rush. And so they become fixated on what's the oral stage. They always want to be given, God, grant me, give me, I want grace. And it starts that way. That's God's come on us, That it says, gives you a little grace, and you say, yes, I want more, more, more. Okay, we start following. Then we come to the next place where it says, yes, but you need to have some discipline. And that is what comes in the Freudian anal stage. You got to keep clean. You got to know where to relieve yourself. You can't do it everywhere, And so the learning of the basic moral guidelines, and with it the building in of the superego, begins at that stage, the anal stage. There are some people who get fixated there, and most fundamentalists are, because they have a sense that there is a certain inerrancy, that there's nothing wrong, and if anything is wrong, it's because I'm not hitting what this tells me to do. How do I understand the Bible? Never mind, it's none of your business to interpret it. Read it as it is straight. You see how fundamentalism comes. And then they'll say, who the hell are you that you are going to start changing what the halacha is, what the law is, How could you do this in the face of such great gedolim? And then they tell me about the past generation. And that attitude is a very strong attitude, and I would want to say it permeates a lot of what goes on in Judaism in certain quarters. But then you don't stay there all the time. After a while, if you've done the discipline and you're really good at it, so you don't have to pay attention to it anymore, then you start looking for meaning, for beauty, for symbolism. Oh boy, this is great, There's so many thresholds that I go through. And the mezuzah has to be on every threshold. My eyes have to have a mezuzah, my nose have to have a mezuzah. You see what I'm saying? And he's gone into this whole wonderful area of symbolism and say, this is so great. And look how we have it, the whole Siddur is built on that. Matzah zu shanu ochlin. Take a look at this matzah, And we demonstrate the thing, and then we get into the place. And what does it mean? Well, there are 4 kids who ask questions, and you go into the whole business of the Haggadah. Symbols is great. But then comes a time, and you can spend a lot of time there, because there are some people who have been spiritual aesthetes. They're always looking for, like people go, Chateau Latif, I want even a better champagne. They're always looking for the connoisseur's part. And they say, yes, but the Missa Solemnis of Mozart is much better than Yossel Rosenblatt. So they're going to come with this thing. They're always into that place. It's a good place to be because it is enchanting your view. You see things with more dimensionality, and this is just wonderful. The problem is he can also get stuck there. And the worst example of someone who is stuck in symbolism is Nero fiddling while Rome is burning. Ustinov played him playing the lyre, O lambent flame, as he goes and sees. He doesn't understand what the pain that's being caused to people. And then there are some people say, Lama li zivchechem, enough with the sacrifices already. When you find the hungry, bring him to the house. If he's homeless, help him, Do you think that I want you to fast and trouble your stomach? Trouble your conscience, and so on and so forth. And they will start saying, whatsoever you are doing for other people, that's what counts. And all of a sudden there is a level of mitzvah that gets so beyond the usual thing, like the story told about Reb Moshe Leib Sasava. They said that he disappeared during Slichas time. So there was a Litvak there who asked the people, where is the Rebbe? Did I tell that story before? No. So he asked, where is the Rebbe? And they said, the Rebbe is in heaven. That's where he is right now. He'll come back for Shacharis, but now he's in heaven. The Litvak, who is, how you say in Yiddish, from Missouri, he wants to be shown. So he goes and hides out, and as the Rebbe comes out of the house, he's wearing clothes like a peasant going into the forest. He has a hatchet with him and a bundle of rope, and he goes into the forest and picks up the wood, makes a bundle, lines it up, schleps it on his shoulder, and goes into town, and the Litvak is behind him. Where is he going with that stuff? He goes to a shack at the end of it's like, Stettlach used to be like a strip mall, that there was a main road, and they were clustered around it. So he goes to one of the last houses there, a shack, and knocks on the door. And an old woman's voice comes out, where is it now? And he said, it is Yvonne, the Polish peasant. What do you want, Yvonne? I have some wood to sell you. I haven't got any money. I'll trust you, you have a good God, I'll get paid. But I can't even get up and make the fire. I'll go and do that for you. And he goes in and sets up the fire, and while he is starting the fire, he's reciting the psalm, the slichot. So the Litvak comes back, and somebody says, so where's the Rebbe? And someone says, he's in heaven. The Litvak says, if not higher. If not higher. This is such a wonderful story because it talks about this level when the concern is for other people. Reb Yisroel Salanter was invited once to the home of a person who said, Rebbe, we have such a wonderful Shabbos table. We sit till midnight at the table and sing and celebrate and so on and so forth. And he says, I am sorry. I can't come and join you. You see, I need to go to sleep earlier. So if you can't make it really to be finished by 10 o'clock, don't invite me. Rebbe will be done by 10 o'clock. And so he comes, and another story, as he washes, so he says, you can use more water, enjoy, take more water. He says, on whose back did the water come up from the river? Remember, they didn't have a sink to take. On another person's back, I have enough water to fulfill the commandment. And so, 10 o'clock, he says, Good Shabbos, on his way out, and the lady is in the kitchen, comes and says, thank you, Rebbe, I want to kiss your hands. It is so wonderful what you have done. You see, I have been up here from before dawn in order to make Shabbos, to set up the challahs and to do the cooking and do all that stuff. Usually when they don't finish until midnight, I'm so tired, and then I have to clean up and get ready, prepare things for breakfast. Thank you so much for having come. Now, another story like this, they keep coming up. A man comes and asks Reb Chaim Volozhiner. No, Reb Chaim, yes, it was Reb Chaim Brisker. And he asked him, Rebbe, can I drink 4 cups of milk for the Pesach Seder? And he says, no. And he hands him 20 rubles. And his wife says, but you can do it. It's kosher to do it on the 4 cups of wine. Yeah, but he won't have any fleischiks if he's going to have it on milk. So he realizes this person doesn't have enough to really celebrate and gives it to him. These levels of concern that you find, that's the level, the latency level. That's where we care more for the chevre. And about this, we're going to talk a little bit more because the social realm is important. There is a level when a person gets to where they really are not interested in much, except to say, I only want you, like Rabbi Zalman is saying, Rabbi Shalom, Master of the universe, I don't want your paradise, I don't want your world to come, I want you, which is like saying, all this that I am in, that I see, is somehow like a shimmer or a dream. What really counts is, I want to just flow into God like a drop flows into the ocean. Now that's a very high level. And most of us will take several incarnations until we'll make it to that place. But it is very important to recognize that if you are on one stage and then you say, that is the way spirituality should be, lick your honey, that's all that you count, that counts. Another one will say, be sure you keep your discipline, and they'll fight and argue about which is the right way. And the answer is, they're all stages in the process of the thing. So the fallacy of stability, I just wanted to get rid of it, okay? So I want to review a little bit, how do we prepare? If I want to do something on the computer, I have to boot the right software. How many times people go to daven in such a way that they don't even turn on the computer? And if they turn on the computer, they just turn on, the letters and nothing much happens. So how do you get to really do it? That you have to open it up in a much better way, and you have to have the right software. Now, what would be the right software to get me into Davvenen? When I started before with singing, I made a beginning. I was saying that place, ay ay da 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 di dum, ay 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 ay. It comes from a place that is giving gentle devotion to God. It says, I want to give you this love that I feel at this moment. It comes with a Niggun. So that's one level of booting the software. You know which Niggun turns you on, which music turns you on. Then there are stories. You may know a good story, that when you review that story in your mind, then you will go and daven much, much better. The temptation is to start telling a lot of these stories right now, but they're around. And then, besides the stories that you hear from other people, if you can tune into your theophanies. What do I mean? Last Shabbos, it was Parshat Shkalim, and there were Bench Rosh Chodesh, and at that point, it occurred to me how important the whole business of Simcha is, because around Tisha B'Av it says, Mishenichnas Av mematim besimcha. You do less Simcha. Mishenichnas Adar marbin besimcha. But as the Koska says, but always besimcha. Always besimcha. So imagine I now sit back and I ask and I tell myself this story and that insight, always besimcha, always besimcha. And I thought about that and it gave me an aha. If I can gather more of these ahas, if I had them all at once, I would be so enlightened, because they come and they go, they come and they go. And most of the time they get lost because we don't put them in a vessel, or to put it in computer language, we don't give it a file name and decide in which folder to keep it, And that's a very important thing. So when I start davening, and I can take something that I had written before that enthused me, that I got insight for, and I call that in. So now I have a story, I have a Niggun, and I have these things. What does it mean? I am now sensitized to get stuff out of those words that I wasn't sensitized to before. I'm just opening up and saying these tangents are going to be important. It's almost like going to the browser and say, watching these 3 programs, whatever comes up, hook it up and see what comes out of that. See, that's the way in which I would talk about that. Another thing, you have an encounter with a special person, and you remember the taste of that encounter. And when I think, for instance, when my Rebbe davened, and how he davened, and I could almost see him and hear him and feel him. If I tune into that before I daven, it's so much different. It's going to be so different. So the issue that people say, the prayer book doesn't turn me on, I would want to say, the book doesn't turn you on. You got to turn on the book. You have to go to those modalities in which whatever is in a book is going to come to life. And there has to be a logging on to the longing. It's so hard to talk about the longing without getting a sense of infantile selfishness. Because there's an element that inside of me, when I regress, I become the baby that wasn't held enough by mama. Okay? But that may be one of the fibers, in the cable of longing. But there are other places of longing in which the word that we say, halavai, oh, that it should only be that way. And so we have a picture when we say, what will be when Mashiach will come? We have a certain picture how that would be. When we think right now, with the capacity that Earth has of communication and the ability to share with each other, if we would live like an organism together, in which, for instance, the Senate would be like the liver, not fighting part of itself. If we lived in this organismic way, wow, how that would be. And once I have a look at that, I have a longing for that. Oy, if only, the halavai. So that longing has to be brought to the Davvenen too, because that's how I nurture that longing. And I have a suggestion. And I want to first talk a little bit about why the vernacular. Even if you know Hebrew, and even if you're fluid with the Siddur, and you can translate every word that's in the Siddur, if you haven't once davened in the vernacular, you really haven't gotten to what the Siddur is about. They're images that you won't get from the Siddur alone. For instance, you go up on a mountain facing east, it still is night. And you wait for the graying of the sky and the dawn that comes on. And finally the sun comes over the horizon. And it feels like such a miracle that happened. And then you say, Hameir la'aretz v'ladarim alea berachamim. You are illumining the world and all who dwell there with compassion. Having been on the mountain, the next time you're going to say those words, it will have a little, overtone of what you have seen on the mountain. And the thing will become rich that way. The vernacular does two things. There's high language, and the Common Book of Prayer in English, the Episcopal Book of Prayer, is a remarkable document. because if you were to play a king's court and you deal with God like you deal with, with the court. And if you look at the cathedrals, they're all made so as if the throne is the altar, and people come in and are in front of the throne. And so they have a whole picture for that. And they use a language that is very formal. In fact, they don't want to break down and cry when they address His Majesty the King. They want to do this in a very special way. But when your heart is breaking and you want to talk to God and you want to cry, you wouldn't be using the language of vouchsafe, O Lord, and bestow upon us, but it would go a lot more, Oi Tates Isa, Father of the orphans, protector of the widow, take a look where we are, what solace we have. You see, in Yiddish, it was easy to do that. And we never complained about somebody who davened like this in Yiddish. In fact, the women were supposed to do that, and there was a special Siddur called the Korban Mincha Siddur, which was translated for women's davvening. And then there was a whole bunch of collection of women's prayers called, Tchinis. Tchinis means like supplications. And they would have headings. The prayer of a wife when her husband is away on a business trip, that he may come home safe, the prayer of a mother for her children. They had those, and there was a whole thing that showed people who otherwise would find themselves speechless. What can I say? I don't know even how to talk to God. But when I open that book and I say, Ay, Rebbeinu Shalom, my man is auf dem Weg, and so on and so forth. It would be the language in which she would be speaking to people who would be well disposed toward her and talk about what's going on in her heart. When it comes to do it in English, because of the King Jamesy stuff, He leadeth me, green pastures and so on and so forth. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I don't have the same panic that I have when they put me on the gurney and they're about to take me into the operating room and the anesthesia is beginning, That's a whole other thing because there's a real thing about it. So how would I talk about it? So it's necessary to create a way of doing the Davvenen in such language, and that ties in with what we were doing last time. We were talking about blue jeans spirituality. So, if you have one of those Siddurim, and I really feel that I should tell you that I worked very hard to create such a Siddur, and if you're interested, get in touch with us so that you can get a copy. It'll make it much easier for you because first you have to sit and read through the whole thing. Not all at once, but if you haven't read through the whole Siddur, you don't know where the places are that turn you on, So, for instance, the first time you read it out loud so you can hear it, because otherwise you won't feel. Then take a marker along, and then you come across a line, in which you want to say, Rofei chol basar u'mafli la'asot, the healer of our flesh, who does wondrous things, to which I would add another translation, who creates spontaneous remissions. You see what I'm saying? So it hits me at that point that that's what I have in mind, and so I underline, I highlight that. So I now know I have a highlighted Siddur. I know which passages I would like to use. I know also the limit that I have for time. So having that limit, I know I will go ahead and stick with that limit, but I want to take the nuggets that I need for today. And it won't be the same another day, because each day we will pick another one of those things we highlighted that is closer to where we are in our feeling. There was a time when I was working with teenagers in a camp, a summer camp, and I would go sometimes from one bunk to another and tell the people who were there, today you got 12 minutes for doing your morning prayer. Another bunker would say, you got 18 minutes to do your morning prayer. I never gave it more than 20 minutes. So there were some people there, good academic people, observant people, who were saying, what are you doing that for? What are you cutting it down to 20 minutes? Is that the whole Davvenen? And I said to them, if you add more than 20 minutes, they won't do it. The thing has to be a doable thing. And then when you start looking at the people who are rattling it off fast, they also do it in 20 minutes. If you watch them, they can, from Matova to Aleinu, they can do that, a high-speed thing. So if you then say, this is the time that I have, and this is the time I want to devote to it, and so you create the preparation that I was talking about before. It's important sometimes for people who can't get out of the house or who don't feel necessarily that they want to go to shul to observe a yard site. And they would like to daven Mariv at home and say a Kaddish. Now, before the virtual world, I didn't have anything that I could offer. But now I can offer a Mariv service on a DVD in which there is a whole kehillah, a whole community davening Mariv, and you're invited to say the Kaddish when the time comes and you can daven along. I have the same for Shachrit. And I think that's an important possibility for people, You sometimes need something to get you into that place. And especially for shut-ins, that's such a wonderful thing. For people in homes for the aged. I once produced a number of them for distribution in homes for the aged, so that those people who would like to have access to that experience can have it. It is important to recognize that for most people, Davvenen will not be a reality unless they have learned to do it at least in Twosies. I got to go back. I once wrote a thing called Between Solo and Minyan. When you look at the way in which it usually goes, if you have 8 people, there is not a minyan. With 9, we start fudging around with the Sefer Torah, doing something. But if you have 8 people there won't be a minyan. So everybody's expected to daven on his own. And I disagree. Because when 3 people eat together, you have a mezumin. And when 6 people have davened, when 6 people have davened and another 4 haven't, you can repeat the Shemon Esrei. So you see that there are numbers that we have between 10 and 1. So I started to go into the thing that I would call transpersonal sociology. What is it that we expected if I had the minyan of my dream? And I had such occasions before with some students who were eager to do that. So we organized ourselves to stand in the positions that are on the tree of life. This one was in the Keter place, this one was in the Chochmah place, she was in the Bina place, and everybody had a place. And then everybody had to contribute something from their place to the minyan, and they got certain prayers that were earmarked for that sphere to say. And it was a wonderful thing, because we were so in ensemble together that I could understand how minyan works. There's a place when everything is plugged in the right way and the lights go on, And so when they say the Shechina is there where 10 people are davening, not necessarily if they hate each other, but if they daven in such a way that they create an ensemble of these 10 sephirot and attitudes and ways of functioning together, I have no doubt that there's a presence there at that time. But I think it can happen between 2 people also, between 3 people, 4 people, 5 people. 7 is a wonderful number. Again, you can do it in so many ways. But I want to begin with the Twosie, because the heart needs to have an other to talk to. And when you have a way of feeling the other person, you get into what Buber called the I-thou relationship. Some years ago, it was the 10th yahrzeit of Martin Buber, that a number of us met in Washington, D.C. under the leadership of Art Waskow, and it was wonderful. And some people gave papers, and I said I wanted to do an I-thou lab, because it's easy to say I-thou is better than I-it. How do you do it? What do you have to do inside of yourself in order to get to that place? So we did a number of exercises. And about a few things I want to speak right now. Ani mamin be'emunah shalema, I really, truly, fully believe that in the center of my being, which for other reasons I haven't got a better word to call the heart, but I just don't mean the pump, that in the center of my being is a sanctuary where the Shechina is. Okay? Now, imagine I want to talk to God, to the Shechina, and I'm not trying anymore to turn to Jerusalem or going up there and out there, because I know it's inside. It's very hard for me to go and pray to the God within me. And the chief reason for that is that the ego stands at the door and says, you mean me, you mean me, you mean me, And so it is much easier if I can say to you, would you do me a favor? I have a real concern I want to bring to God. Would you allow me to address God in your sanctuary? Put your ego aside for a moment. And as I look into your eyes and I want to go to the one who dwells in your heart, I want to say, please send the refuah shalema to Malka Bas Shoshana. Amen. That goes so much easier, do you understand? Because I see you, I see your face, but along with that goes an affirmation that what I see is another aspect, another face that God is wearing. And so I can do that. So could you imagine if 2 people do this with each other in the morning or at night before they go to sleep, and they could say, a husband could say to the wife and the wife to the husband, I want to speak to the God within you about this day and about the concern I have for the kinderlach, and it's just all that stuff, if it could be that way. How wonderful that would be. Another way of doing that is when I'm reading the Siddur, I can't do the work. I always try and show to people that they hold the Siddur the wrong way, You come to shul, and for the 10th time you read the introduction, who was the committee that organized that Siddur, because you're bored with it. Because if it tries to tell you something that you hadn't encountered before, you'd be interested in it. But you read it week after week, it's the Zelba Maisa, So in a sense, it becomes really boring. If, on the other hand, I can bring myself to do this for you, that I come to the words, Nishmat kol chai tevarech et shimcha Hashem Elokeinu, the soul of every living being praises you, O Lord. And I say, do me a favor, I will be doing the audio, and you do the video. Okay? And then we're going to switch. And then could you imagine if I start reading, and you at that point don't have to bother holding a book or getting words out of the book, but all that you need to do at this point is to create the virtual scene in your awareness of the soul, the breath of everything that lives. With in-breath it breathes you in, with the out-breath it breathes you out. The whole world, all living beings, look what kind of a symphony is going on through all the levels of being, you know? And you do that in your video. And then when I'm finished with the paragraph, I hand you the Siddur, and you read to me, and I go to that place. And that is such a wonderful way, and I call that socialized meditation. Because what's going on in my mind, I want to share with you. I want you to share with me. And then something happens that goes even longer and longer, because we can get to places where neither of us could go alone when we do it this way. Another exercise I developed for that time, and that was that you begin a sentence and you don't finish it. And I finish the sentence and I begin the next sentence. And then you finish it and start the next sentence. So it's ping-pong this way. None of us knows what's actually going to happen. You know, what you will say after I say that. Anybody, are you prepared to play with me, anybody? Okay. The purpose of this exercise is?
To explore my inner world, which I'm kind of scared of. You're going to see within me that you're going to see within me
that you are, first of all, fully alive in a region that many people are asleep in. And for this I give thanks, because it'll bring you to
a place where I'm able to actually honor that part of me. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you, because
it will make it sure that there's not one mind doing it, we're two minds together. And when two people are together, then
our combination is greater than the sum of its parts.
Amen. So this was just a wonderful way, you know. Now can you see, if you do this with a person and you pick a topic, you want to say, now we're going to talk about Shabbos, you know. Talk about mitzvahs, talk about the month of Adar, you know. Whatever you want to talk about in this way, you say, we'll start this conversation and try and follow that track, but I don't know what you're going to say, you don't know what I'm going to say. And so we are doing a togethering. And I think that's what you can do good with Twosies. There are things that you can do with other people, and in the largest sense, I have taken people, very large groups even, and had them line up according to their birthdays in the year. So we started with January here, and we ended with December here in the circle. And by the time we were finished with that, the sociogram that we had created was the zodiac. And when you start thinking what this would be like if in the House of Representatives and in the Senate, they could sit like that. So all the Aquarians would be sitting in one place and all the Leos in another place, regardless of their party affiliation. And it would be such a wonderful way, you know, to work together. So that's what I mean about these things between solo and minion. And I do want to go to some other things, but if there are short questions, we'll take them and then we'll be done with this segment.
I have a question, but it might not be small, but I find myself not turned on by prayer by myself anymore.
Yeah.
I find myself unable to access my pain because I feel numb.
Yeah.
But in groups, I find myself turned on by the emotionality in the group.
Yeah.
But I feel if I were to fully let out all of my pain, I would scream out at the top of my lungs, but I don't feel safe doing that even at a Jewish renewal synagogue because it would just be so explosive. So I like, by myself I don't feel it, and then with others I do, but it's too much, you know. So I wrestle with that.
I so wish that a week from tomorrow morning, I will be leading Davvenen at the Vei Kodesh. We'll start at 6:30 in the morning with learning, and then there'll be a minyan with Torah reading. Okay. What I feel is, obviously on Friday night, you won't let out your pain. But what would be if we were to have a vigil on Tisha B'Av night? You know, that's the real time. Yeah. We don't do Tikkun Chatzot, but if we were to do the midnight lament, then that would be the place to come and to get into what that guy called the primal scream, you know? Yeah. So it has to do with the calendar. But I tell you something, if you needed to scream and you called me and a couple of other friends whom you like, I would be with you while you scream your head off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To midwife that expression, that's a very important part. Okay.
I just think about the levels that you were talking about in the beginning.
Yeah.
How do you know what level you're on, first of all? And if you're stuck, how do you unstick yourself to move to another level?
Well, let me start with the last one. If you're stuck, how do you unstick yourself? There's a statement that the rabbis make, En chavush matir et atzmo. Anybody who is in chains can't free himself. Always necessary for somebody else to help you. So if, for instance, without a challenge, you may stay in any of these in a fixation. But let us say you've become a very meticulous person in the anal space. And then I can get you to the place to start thinking about, what do you think about God? What kind of a God do you think who's watching you? Which fingernail you cut first and which one you cut second? And what have you got to do with that? And have you had some other experiences that are beautiful and divine? And how do you want to be with that? And then you bring him out of that and say, because every one of your observances has something there, and you have to try and find it. You know, so you have a challenge. You can break the same challenge later on and say, yeah, you got all this wonderful aesthetic, this holy aesthetic. When was it the last time that you were in a soup kitchen and helped people out? You know, so in each case, the challenge is there. You'll say, what's it got to do with anything? But then it keeps eating inside. And so you have planted something important for them and also for yourself. Yeah.
When you were holding the book open,
Yeah.
and you were talking about taking a paragraph from your friend,
Yeah.
as if it's something in the book, I was remembering a time when I was at services and I just was looking around at people with their books, and I was thinking that it might be better to just have mirrors in the book. And but when you were just speaking, I was thinking mirrors, but not just mirrors to look back at me, but almost turning the book and then having my friend in the mirror. And but I wonder about the possibility of I think this happens, and I want to hear what you have to say about this. Is that when we start to do that too much, and then we lose contact with what's there, or we can start to do what's there in the book too much and never really reflect back or reflect on our friend, and how to kind of work with maybe balancing that?
Well, it's clear that this is necessary, right? Mm-hmm. Now, that's what I said, that this is such a beautiful statement in the book of Ecclesiastes. For everything turn, there is a season, and sometimes it's a time for this and sometimes it's a time for that. And to be able to agree, look, when we were talking, remember when they had that what did they call it? Biorhythm. Sometimes you're above the line, sometimes below the line. It has to move this way. I think the recognition that it depends on the time, the situation, and what's being called in. Because look, what's in an organic way, if you're an organism, if your toe wants something, it doesn't have to fill out petition in triplicate, It comes there right away, because that's what then is the important thing. So that's how a body responds. So in the meantime, many brachas to you for davvening together with other people and to have the enjoyment of some of the things we talked about. Shalom, shalom, kol tuv.